Monlux, and you're watching another episode of Epic Sketch Time. This is a group of anyone really who can be part of this group. We meet every Monday at 4:30 Pacific Time. Come and join us online while we still can. There are rumors that YouTube is going to shut down this type of interface, but I have a fairly good confidence that will be replaced with something. And in the meantime, we still get to enjoy doing it nice and easy. So go to the link down below in the doobly-doo and subscribe, and you'll get an email reminder every Sunday when we're going to be having an event, and another email invitation into the group. I'm a freelancer in Tacoma, Washington, and some of the things I like to do is draw cartoon reviews of movies. Gentlemen, introduce yourself and tell us what you like to do.
Hi, I'm Bill. Bill Morse. I am a freelance in Seattle, Washington, and when I'm not doing illustration, I also like to do cartoons, walk, and do watercolor landscapes.
Hey everybody, my name's Ian Castruita. You can find my work over at unfedartist.com. I'm a graphic designer, illustrator, and comic artist working out of Tempe, Arizona. If you check out my stuff and you like what you see, please consider supporting me on Patreon. That's patreon.com/unfedart. And otherwise, it's good to be with you guys. So what are you all working on?
Haven't decided yet. I barely settled down before I got here. But I'm thinking of working on some promotional material. I've been presenting my comic strips on Instagram with the oh-so-popular sliding format, and the advertisement with the link at the bottom is something I threw together at the last minute, and it shows.
I've been enjoying reading your comics on Instagram with the sliding bit. I think it's a good format. I certainly have been looking at it more often than on my Feedly account. Previously, I would tend to save up like a week's worth and then read them all at once. But now I'm reading them every day.
Cool.
Yeah, I need to start posting on Instagram again. I was doing that, and then for whatever reason, it just kind of fell by the wayside. It seems like I got my graphic design stuff in my company, and then I want comics to be more of a part of it, but you got to kind of pay attention to the stuff that is actually paying the bills, and unfortunately,
of course,
it kind of distracts me from everything else. But yeah, I'll get back in the swing of things. I just need to find a good rhythm and start budgeting my time, so I set up little reminders. Well, I have something I want to share with you guys. I don't think I have before. So I don't know if you're like me, but when you use visual reference, sometimes you need to you grab a photo or something on the internet and you need to flip it. So it's like a different angle or something like that. And usually I've just been using Photoshop. So I came across this after watching a YouTuber who specializes in like 3D rendering and stuff. It's called PureRef, and it's just it's basically just a reference easel that lets you quickly kind of put together a collection of references and easily like flip them around, resize them, and it's just an app dedicated to kind of just posting your reference images on it.
Oh.
It's pretty lightweight and it's quick and it's free. So I really like the fact that I haven't had to open up Photoshop just to work on it.
Cool. I just realized I'd actually gotten that a couple of years ago, and then I got out of the habit of using it.
Oh. Well, I'm really glad I have it. You can also save your reference boards too, so you don't have to like constantly rebuild them. And if you have a project you want to get back to later, you can just save the board with your project files, and your references are all up in one place. It's like I said, it's pretty slick, and I'm enjoying it. And if anybody's watching, I hope it helps you out.
Oh, nice. Oh, if before I switch the share on, I can, speaking of the watercolors, get to show off my vacation pictures, if anybody had seen them already.
You posted some of them on Instagram, didn't you?
Yeah. But anyway, here's, I did pretty well for myself. I think did 9 in all, which I think is a record. And I'm mostly happy with them, with the exception of the one at the pond, which I freely admit because of the time constraints, I rushed blocking things out.
I should mention that all 3 of us are members of the Graphic Artists Guild. So I'm kind of curious, have you guys done any guild stuff? I missed the last webinar, I think.
Well, let's see. I just had my campaign for my second term as secretary. Does that count?
Oh yeah, I voted for you.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Considering I didn't have any competition, it wasn't mostly an issue, but I'd feel guilty if it was just me voting for myself.
All right.
Well, I voted for you, Bill.
Cool.
I was volunteering for the guild, but my like I said before, my business it's kind of requiring I spend more time on it, so I had to bow away from all of that, which was unfortunate. I don't want to get too much into the weeds because I don't know how interesting it is, but I was working on a data strategy for the Graphic Artists Guild as far as how they use data and the ways that they can use data. And so I spent this past 6 months working with Arizona State University and some of their students trying to look at ways to do that and get suggestions, as well as like researching like the current industry and like looking at like vendors like Adobe and stuff who offer that. I mean, data for me, like as a business owner, it's super important. Like I keep track of my time and I try to look at like, my expenses and my accounting and all that stuff. But there's so much that we can use, especially when it comes to like social media and like website and all that stuff. So just trying to get a handle on it all, I think is important for artists. But unfortunately, it's also kind of intimidating, right? And
yeah, and
I wanted to look into it. Just as much for my own purposes as it was for the guild. I think the guild, if they really dive into it, they'll benefit from it and hopefully find ways to ultimately just be more effective in like the activities that they do. But part of the problem is first knowing what kind of questions to ask and stuff like that. So. Like I said, it's not necessarily the most exciting, like epic sketch time conversation, but that's what I was working on before I kind of bowed away from my volunteering.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I've sort of been trying to improve. I've been starting to pick up a lot more books to improve my social networking strategy. So. Yeah,
it's tough. And it's kind of, I don't know if the right word is apropos, but on webcomics.com, Brad Geiger just posted a really interesting take on this whole idea of social media only being 1% effective. Like you only have 1% of people that you reach out to that actually kind of engage, and just this idea that, well, if it's only 1%, why am I wasting my time on this? And it's really more complicated than that.
Yeah, because I've generally been ignoring his social media advice because generally the biggest advice, as he's saying, is don't bother posting your strips because that's preaching to the choir.
Gosh, I don't know. I'll have to have to try to find that. I mean, he's posted tons of stuff on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I generally value his advice, and the few times that I've actually met the guy, he's generally very good conversation, knows his stuff, and very personable.
Oh yeah, no, I took advantage of his consultation when I finally became self-employed, because I back then and still now want to make comics a bigger part of my business, but my whole thing so far has just been trying to make comics for corporations and stuff like that, and so I really wanted his advice and his take on that, and you know, I'm still trying to unravel that mystery, but you know, I've done it in the past. I'm sure I could do it again in the future. I just need to find a way to find some clients who are interested. But yeah, he was the one who kind of pushed me in the right direction for a few things, and so it was definitely worth his advice if you can ever get the chance to talk to Brad Geiger. It's
I mean, yeah, I mean, the few times I've talked to him, it's the usual run into him at a convention, and he always impresses me because he's one of the people who actually remember you, or at least he's very good at faking it, which I admit is a convention art form.
Does he remember you by name, or is he like, oh, hey, it's you?
Yeah, I think probably more the hey, it's you, but considering it's unsolicited before the show starts, I'm going to be more convinced by it than the usual keep a straight of the art form of not to look confused if somebody remembers you.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm never able to remember names, but faces I can always pick up, and it's just like
same here. I have a visual memory that scares people, but don't ask me to put labels on them.
Yeah, and so it's just awful because I'm like, oh, I think I've said this before on this Epic Sketch Time, or not this one, but you know, in the past. So it's just like that everybody always remembers my name, and I never remember anybody else's name. And it's just like, oh, this transaction isn't equal. I need to remember their name, otherwise I'm going to look like a jackass.
Mm-hmm.
I have found a way to counter that.
Oh yeah,
I wear a name tag.
Yeah, there you go.
And that way, when everyone calls me Mark, I assume I'm kind of going, I said, oh, you read my name tag. He says, no, I didn't. And I said, where's your name tag?
That's a good strategy.
Come on, I'm fishing here, you know. And then they can't tell if I'm joking or if I'm but yeah, most of my friends know that I'm terrible with names.
And you probably run into a fair lot of people. I mean, you seem to hit the conventions more than any of us.
I do a lot of social networking.
Yeah.
Or out in the public, and you know, I'll admit that I'm not the. I wish I was better at remembering people's names, but it usually takes a while.
Mm.
So what are you guys working on today?
At the moment, I'm just doing some character portraits for the doing rotating labels for my Instagram strip posts. Because before, what I've been posting at the moment is having a picture of the main 3 cast members, just boring posters with the Read Rhapsody's URL, and I know I can do better than that. So I'm sort of just doing some scenes with those some of the main characters, and I'm sort of not sure whether I should have more text beyond the Read Rhapsodies and the URL. I mean, I have this nice little thesis of why the strip's called that, with this sort of 2 lines, life is a rhapsody, defines a rhapsody and then says anything you can jam to can't be all bad. And I wonder if that's just too wordy for an Instagram post.
Huh. I couldn't help you there. I don't know.
Though, admittedly, who am I to talk, considering my strip itself is very wordy.
Talking about the word section?
Yes.
I think you should definitely have your convention intro sentence in there, like, I draw webcomics or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I have, if you like this movie review, you may like my book at such and so, and then do the link.
Right.
But I also do a ton of hashtags.
Oh, I always do it as many hashtags as I can think of, though I've noticed that I've heard mixed theories on whether that's a good thing or not. I mean, one of the guild's social media guru says as many as possible, but then I've come across a few people who will say less is more.
I think a nice, comfortable thing is about a dozen.
I mean, though at the same time,
what I do is I keep in Evernote a list of hashtags, and I have my basic set of hashtags defining, what the theme of the post is, whether or not it's a sketch note or my comic or an event, and then I have usually a series of hashtags that are very specific to that particular topic.
Yeah.
Movie review or graphic facilitator, things that basically leads that would be of interest to people of that particular image.
Actually, I do.
Yeah, and I just copy and paste those little groups into my my email. But when it comes to, like, say, my movies, when I'm because I have a long blurb of text,
Yes,
I will go into that text, and if there's a name of an actor, I'll just crunch that down into one hashtag.
actually, yeah, because actually I do templates on WordPress, so for example, the comic strip, I have Rhapsody's webcomic, daily comic strip, comics of Instagram, Seattle cartoonist as a baseline, and then I add the description of the strip and whatever other features are in that day's comic. But as far as for example, when I do my Wednesday movie reviews, I always put down the genre, obviously the movie's names, the directors, the main cast, and those, I don't know if it's the text or the taglines, or if it's because there's more movie fans on Instagram than there are cartoon fans, but those generally get my most traffic.
So what I'm doing right now is I need to go in and select my Pantone equivalents for this enamel pin that I'm going to be doing.
Uh-huh.
And I want to use similar colors to other pins, like this blue. I've done a lift off of the Killer Clowns from Outer Space pin that I did. This was an earlier version of the pin with the blue veins in the head, but when I shrunk it down to the actual size, which is about an inch and a half tall, they didn't read well, so I just decided to replace those with just some black lines for the musculature, and
a visual equivalent of a visual example of the KISS principle.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, these were some. I was talking to James Stowe earlier today at Freelance Fandango, and he's working on a concept for a graphic novel pitch to his agent, and was asking for people to do alien designs. And I did one for him at the time, and I thought, I could draw up a couple other little weird concepts and send them to him. But I've always noticed that most aliens these days, they're like naked.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering what's up with that. At least one of the reasons I enjoyed watching Valerian was you got to see a lot of not so naked aliens.
I mean, generally, what I've been going with my current designs is, and perhaps I haven't been doing as well as I could be because of it, has been trying to go for aliens that there's no way in heck that a human being could fit inside that costume.
You don't want it to look like a kaiju?
I don't want it to look like somebody with a mask on, like in Star Trek or Star Wars.
I have a movie question for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that the creature of the Black Lagoon was pretty much the prototype of the rubber suit monster?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the dates. I mean, I'm pretty sure there were rubber suit monsters before him. I mean, what I've read about the design of that thing, it's definitely the best example.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know to guess. I mean, rubber suit monster. I think I always think Godzilla, but
did Godzilla come out before Creature of the Black Lagoon?
I don't know. That's a Wikipedia question. Why do you ask?
I'm thinking about writing it into an article for the fourth book that I'm working on pop culture.
Oh, cool.
Okay, pretty close. Godzilla was 54 and Creature was 54. Very close.
Yeah, I still haven't seen the latest Godzilla movie. I really wanted to check it out too, so I need to find an excuse to get out of here.
Godzilla, King of Monsters.
Yeah.
I went and saw it.
So, thumbs up, thumbs down. What do you think?
I love kaiju movies.
Yeah.
This was definitely a kaiju movie. You can't, don't expect more than a really good kaiju movie. I thought it was a fantastic kaiju movie, so I will give it, as far as kaiju movie, I would give it at least a solid 8. So,
I'm I guess from the generation that didn't know the word kaiju until Pacific Rim came out, and then suddenly it's like, oh, all that's kaiju. I didn't know that, because I used to watch like reruns of Ultraman and stuff like that, and I mean, my little brother would always watch Power Rangers and stuff, and I just had no idea that was all a genre unto itself. Hey, Mark, what's your take on the the enamel pin business? Like, I mean, you're obviously working on a new one. Are you pretty happy with the way things are turning out, or you have some like advice for any of us that might be curious about it?
Here's what I've discovered that there's a structure on Kickstarter that works really, really well. Okay, so I'll explain it by doing this. Back when I was doing my deck of playing cards, okay, so I had this wonderful deck of playing cards, and I wanted to make 1,000 of them. And I knew I was going to have to do a print run of 1,000. I knew I was going to have to come up with basically $3,500, which I knew would be completely feasible given the size of my social media and how much I could spread the word out amongst my friend. Of $35,000 for my size of group, I can pretty safely get between $35,000 and $4,500 by doing a media campaign. You know, I've got like a couple hundred Facebook friends and about 5,000 Twitter followers, and now I have like just over 1,000 Instagram followers. And let's say, so I knew I had enough people to get the word out and spread it to get this amount. However, in order to get up into the analytics on Kickstarter, you want to reach your goal within 24 hours. If you can do that, they will bump you up in your profile and kind of promote you as a success story. If I had put out 3,500, my graph would have looked like this. There would have been this big jump of interest at the beginning. It would have plateaued, and then there'd be this other graph of interest, or when I do the final push, and I'd get that amount. So what I decided was to go to this point in the graph and make that my goal. So I decided, okay, I'll make my goal $1,200 and see if I can get that within the first 24 hours. I got $1,200 within the first 12 hours. So that was a big success. And if you look at my graph goes like this all throughout the campaign. It's something you don't normally, it breaks this rhythm. And the reason for that was people kept discovering it because Kickstarter was promoting it. And also I was promoting it, but the two of us together was making this a lot easier to do. And you have to plan on doing little promotionals along the way to kind of get this level of interest happening. What they do on enamel pins, and you'll see a lot of enamel pins set up like this. They'll do a series of pins, not just one. And the first pin, their goal is going to be $300. Well, $300 is like a very low goal. You can knock it out. You know your friends with if you've got a social media presence like this that can pull in something like that for your end goal, asking for something for $300 is definitely going to get it within the first 24 hours. You then have listed as a stretch goal the second pin, and to get to that goal, you go $300. You make that goal another $300. Well, because you set this part as your initial goal to be obtained and you reached it within the first 24 hours, now Kickstarter is promoting you. It's just a matter of how many people like these additional pins in the series. You keep adding in each another stretch goal. You have all the art for these pins done completely ahead of time, maybe with a prototype on the first one that you can show off during your little video. There are people that are doing this, and they're probably doing the same thing that I did with my cards, which is a third of the sales from Kickstarter, a third of my profits covered fulfillment, pardon me, a third of my overall gross covered all the fulfillment I needed to do on the pins. The manufacture of the pins I needed to, or pardon me, the cards I needed to get out, and the mailing of the cards I need to send out, and the boxes and the posts and the freight, all of that was covered in a third out of the third of the total that I received. I then used the full amount to buy my 1,000 cards, but of those 1,000, only about 2,500 were actually needed to be used for fulfillment. That left me with a paid-off inventory of over 700 decks. So now when I sell those decks at conventions, they're sheer profit and they pay for my show. My guess is that the people who are doing these enamel pins are
It's 5 o'clock.
They're marketing to the Kickstarter audience. This is their marketplace. This is their main profit, is coming off of how many people are interested in buying each one of these pins. Say that a pin runs you $3 to produce, say, a 2-inch pin. Some of these pins might be that big. Let's say they are. That means you need to sell, if you're selling them at, say, doing an early bird and you're offering them for $12 each, plus you've got the shipping, which can be a separate amount. That means you don't really have to include that as part of your figure, because Kickstarter doesn't. Kickstarter does include your freight as your total, so you have to figure that part in. So $16 for each pin, packaging, all that noise. You know that, let's say, so the pin costs $3, the packaging's $4, that's $7 out of the 12. That leaves you with a $5 profit going for each pin. You need to make at least $300 to get to your goal. That means you need to sell at least 20 pins. That's going to be pretty easy. Usually when you buy pins, let's say they're $3 each, you're going to buy them in lots of either 50 or 100. So that's 300. That means, pardon me. So yeah, it's going to cost you at least 300 to get those pins produced. But what's happening is The moment you start doing multiple pins, you're going to be saving costs on shipping because you can fit more than one pin into a package. You got your envelope here. An envelope could take easily 4 or 5 pins. So you can cover all these pins and not have to deal with, you can keep that money for the freight. So that's where your profit's coming in, is from your saving on the shipping. And you're left over, if you're buying 100 pins and you're only having to produce 20 to get each one of these levels fulfilled, that's leaving you with an inventory of fully paid product of more than double what you're paying for. So it's a really good structure. Or you can produce less pins, say 50, instead of 100, have less in inventory and keep that money as just sheer profit. And if you look at the people on Kickstarters who are doing enamel pins, most of the pins are selling for about $12. They're managing to do a series. A lot of these pin collectors will buy the entire series up to like 7 or 8. Some of the series will peter out at around 5. So I thought, okay, this is a good business model, even if I don't put aside amounts for inventory. I can at least use this to sell directly enamel pins solely to the Kickstarter audience and have viable income. And that's what a lot of designers are doing with this enamel pin craze.
So is that how you came to this? You were seeing that it was popular on Kickstarter, and you're like, I need to get on that?
I was seeing it as popular at conventions last year. It was a big trend at the conventions that enamel pins were the hot item.
So how does it work at conventions? Do you just have like overstock from your Kickstarter campaign and they're already paid for, like your card decks?
Well, what I did was I just flat out bought. I produced a bunch of killer clowns to see how well it would, to test the market with how it would work on my table. The killer clown pins are my best-selling item right now. At the last convention, I think I was selling 10 a day. So that's a straight $150 just off that single item each day. That goes a long way to paying off your table, and that's just that item, besides my other items. So I would say it's nice because it's a small item. You can take it with you on a suitcase. It's not a heavy item. And people like them. I asked a lot of people at conventions what they liked about their pins. Like a lot of people, they really like to have a double backed pin, meaning that here's your pin and it's got 2 needles coming out of the back, and each one of those needles has its own little clasp that goes onto it. There are 2 types of clasps. There's the metal clasp, which has these little wings, and those really grip strongly. But being that as they're metal, they're more expensive than, say, the rubber clasp, which is just a piece of rubber, and it's just a friction hold with the rubber. It doesn't have the little clasp mechanism. Depending on where you go, you're going to be, your company may only do the rubber. If you're getting a really cheap pin, it's going to have a rubber back. When I was doing this killer clown pin over here, it was necessary for me to have 2 backs so that it would remain upright. Also, if you have a larger pin, if something gets caught on it, if it doesn't have a double pin back, it can pop off. But if I was to do, say, a smaller pin, like, it's feasible that on this pin here for They Live, I could do just one pin, have it not centered it here, but kind of bring it up a little bit, put that pin slightly up so that the hanging part, the sheer gravity would keep it centered. I could do that, but we'll see. This might be a one pin back. I'll see if I can find and open up the proof that I sent in.
And what company do you use for all this?
There are a variety of companies. I used one. The one I used for this is My Gifts. Most of these companies are in China. If you are dealing with an American company, they are basically farming it out to China. You're going to be looking at a cost per unit that'll go down the more units you have. It's just like setting up a printer. You're going to be paying a flat out cost just to get this part of the cast done. So, that could just be $150 right off the top, regardless of whether or not you print 50 or 300. So how much you want to alleviate that offset will depend on your quantity that you buy. Then you have additional costs, such as it's more about the amount of detail. This killer clown pin has a lot of detail in it. If I send a pin like this, the They Live pin, but it doesn't have the various lines in it, that would be, this pin is going to cost more to produce than this pin because of the amount of detail. The amount of color really doesn't affect the cost. So you can have a lot of colors, but that's not what's going to change the cost. Then you have what's called cold enamel versus hot enamel. Cold enamel is these black lines, they're kind of raised up like this, and the enamel is down in the valley like that. And you got that kind of ridge structure. And that's a good look for some things. Then you have what's called hot enamel, which is basically, imagine something like the same thing. You got your cast, you got your enamel poured into it. But this plane I just drew right here, they grind off the top like that on the hot enamel, and it's a nice smooth surface. Well, of course, that grinding is going to cost you extra. And that's why it costs more. But it gives a different feel entirely to the pin. Now, I could have gone with cold enamel on the killer clowns and would have given this really warty, rough texture type look. But I already had an idea that some of the other things I wanted to draw would be more favorable for smooth enamel, so I decided to go with a smooth enamel.
Just curious, Mark, did your cookie jar expertise pay off of that? Because
how so, Bill?
I was just the whole stuff about enamels and glazes sounded like.
Oh, no, it's totally different. Just different terminology, but yeah, we could talk about hot glaze and cold glaze with cookie jars, which is a totally different topic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need you to go in depth, but did you make cookie jars? Is that what you guys are talking about?
Oh, no, hang on a moment. Let me take my little camera here. Hang on.
You collect cookie jars.
I collect cookie jars. Matter of fact, at one point I had about 200 cookie jars. I went through sort of like a manic phase, but amongst cookie jar collectors, that's seen as a pitiful collection. You're not really considered a cookie jar collector unless you have like 400. But I got to know my cookie jars. But the problem, one of the dangers of letting anyone know that you're a collector, is that at Christmas time, everybody gives you a cookie jar.
Right, yeah.
Only the worst cookie jars are sold at Christmas time. They're all Chinese imports, thin glazed, and honest to God, I had a platoon of snowman cookie jars. Literally a platoon. That's because, oh my God, it's Christmas. Oh, yeah, look at this cute snowman cookie jar. Oh, Mark will like that. No. I wanted to take a bowling ball to the lot of them.
Did you?
No, but I did purge myself slowly of cookie jars. I think Bill has 2 of them now.
Yeah. And I've been using my Marvin the Martian cookie jar to hold receipts for years.
Now, my wife was actually upset with me when I got rid of the Marvin the Martian cookie jar. Warner Brothers is particularly great. I'm going to give everybody a quick cookie jar lesson. So, this is a Warner Brother cookie jar. It has everything that a cookie jar collector loves. The first thing it has is protrusions. Look at all these protrusions, things that are sticking up and out, and can be extremely, it wouldn't take a child more than 2 years to chip this all to hell, dipping in for cookie jars. The moment a cookie jar gets chipped, the value of it goes down significantly, like almost to nothing. A chip or a crack is like death to a cookie jar. And if you're missing the lid, you just might as well just give up entirely. So the next thing is, above all else, is condition. Condition. So a collector will look for something like, look at this kickstand. It's got this flat flange on the edge. That's just crying out to be cracked and broken, right? That's number one. Number two is, number one is condition. Number two, looking for a lot of protrusions that could potentially break off or make the condition worse and completely devalue your cookie jar. There's 2 types of glazing. There's what's called hot glaze. That's the glaze that's actually put on the cookie jar before it goes into the oven, and it's actually baked into the cookie jar. And there's something called cold glaze, which is nothing more than paint. And you may not tell, but the rim, all the aluminum on this cookie jar is painted on. This rim on the ridge here. Now, what that means is, if you wash this, you might damage the cold plate, and the cold plate could flake off. Matter of fact, there's a cold plate back here. So you're looking for possibilities of that flaking off. I have a cookie jar over here, a McCuen. And this is their classic pig cookie jar.
Before you go on, Mark, I just want to remind our audience that I asked you not to get into depth, but I think you've sunk into the deepest parts you could.
So here we have a McCuen cookie jar. It looks pretty good. But at one point, this pig was covered with cold paint. It had a paint on the kerchief, on his face. He had eyes. It was all painted. Certain key features. And what happened was, some industrious housewife thought, and if you look really closely in some of the cracks, you might find some of the paint and some of the pets. Had this cookie jar not been scrubbed to death, if it still had the cold paint on it, it would be worth several $100s. As it is, it's in good condition. It doesn't have any chips or dings. McCoy's were made, they're really solid cookie jar. He's worth about $85.
Are you the type to like go to like Antiques Roadshow with any of this stuff, or I mean, like where does one resell cookie jars to other collectors? Is it just like eBay?
Well, back before there was the internet, there was the library.
Huh.
And here I have an illustrated guide to cookie jars. I have volumes 1, 2, and 3. That's how nuts I was about cookie jars. And these would have pictures of all the cookie jars with the estimated retail value of what they would be like in perfect condition.
Wow.
So you could have an idea of what the cookie jars were worth, but this was all pre-eBay.
Yeah.
So naturally, eBay changed the price, but hey, I could tell from going in here, looking in, I could say, oh, well, that's an Oogly or a McCoy or a remastered. And I also know how to spot, this is a real thing, imitation cookie jars.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Does the Secret Service know about this?
Anyway,
yeah. This reminds me of like my I collected basketball cards, and so like I think it's called Beckett was a magazine that you'd buy the Beckett to find out the street value of your cards. But am I right? Like when it was comics, Wizard magazine had like a pricing.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who have a lot of pros who do not like Wizard for that reason.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, generally people like to use. Generally, the reference of choice is the Overstreet guide.
Okay, yeah, I know Overstreet too. Yeah.
And as far as cards, I mean, Magic. Oh my God, I have my friends at my favorite comic book shop. They're pretty much going through the damn box of Wizard cards and reappraising them every single week. That's how much fluctuation there are.
You're talking about Magic the Gathering?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I have a friend who actually wanted to start a store because he thought that he could, make a decent living just off of like, buying and selling Magic the Gathering cards. It's crazy what collectors do, man.
Yeah, I mean, as far as
oh wait, hold on. Mark's trying to show us something.
So this is an enamel pin.
Oh, that's awesome. Is that Curious George?
Yeah, reading the Necronomicon.
Oh, wow. Now that's awesome.
And this is an example of, you can kind of see when I turn it this way, the little ridges. This is cold enamel.
Right.
For this treatment, it was perfectly suited for it.
Is that yours?
Oh no, that's somebody. I've got some examples of other people's work. This was at this convention, which was SummerCon. The convention itself had a series of enamel pins, and the only way you could get these enamel pins was to go to the various retailers and go to their table to get the entire set.
Yeah.
So like this one was my friend Russ Richards, and then at another table at another convention, if you would get the pin free if you bought so much worth of merchandise, or you could just pay $8 to get the pin. And here's an example of what it looks like on the back with those. These are the rubber backings, and you'll notice that you can put your logo on the back. That's what that kind of irregularity is. There we go. You can kind of see the lettering.
Yeah.
So for the Curious George one, he had to put two backers on it.
And that's what you had for the clowns, right?
Right. For the clowns, I also put two backers on.
So if we were going to wrap this up, like the main takeaway is that pins are selling, they're popular, they're probably worth looking into, especially if you're going to have a Kickstarter or go to a convention. But like anything else, you have to do your numbers and know what you're going to get into and know what your profit margins are and all that stuff. Just
Right, and you have to think of everything. You have to think of things like packaging. Like this is basically, this is a Moo business card. But what I did was on one side, I had the packaging for my killer clown. I went with Moo because they have that slightly heavier cardstock. And I just punched my enamel pin into this thing.
Yeah.
And then it makes for a little takeaway display. So you print off, let's see, I think I printed off 50 of these for like $35. I did a print run of 100, and then I realized that people didn't want the pins just by themselves in the bags. They really wanted them on the backer board, so I printed off another 50. Now I know in the future, hey, if I print 100 cards, you got to do 100 backers. But yeah, they are viable to sell. And if you do a Kickstarter with them, it won't cost you too much out of pocket. So what I'm working on is a series of alien-themed cards, or pardon me, alien-themed pins, because I'm also looking at it from the amount of production. The reason I put my obscure movie Aliens on hold was the amount of work that it takes to make a pin is about the same amount of work it takes to do one of 52 cards. So if I could do a small series and get those running first, then, if that's the, I know that I could do another deck and sell lots of decks. The decks sell. But I also know that right now, the pins happen to be selling really, really good.
You know, I remember back in the early aughts, it was T-shirts, right? Like every comic artist, had to make a T-shirt, and I guess what I'm wondering is, like, do you think there's like, I guess I already answered my question, but there's like ebbs and flows to this, right? Like, I mean, do you think pins are only going to rise in popularity, or are they going to stay consistent for a few years, or do you see anything else coming along that might be the new enamel pins or the new T-shirt or something like that?
Well, I can tell you this I've done the T-shirt route.
Yeah.
And T-shirts are a pain in the butt. You have multiple sizes. You have to keep multiple sizes in stock. They're big. They're bulky. Doing fulfillment with T-shirts is horrible. Trying to keep them behind your table. Also, at some conventions now, if they don't let you sell T-shirts in Artist Alley. If you're doing a Reed Pop thing, you have to be in the vendor room, or in the vendor's aisle to do that.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Well, yeah. So watch out. Find out. What I'm doing now is I'm testing. There's a guy I know who does strictly T-shirts and does vending for them. And he really liked this black cat design I came up with. And so I said, hey, I'll let you make the T-shirts, but I don't want to have anything to do with selling them. And then you can just give me a cut of the profits. And we're seeing how well that arrangement works out. The shirts aren't flying off the shelf as much as we both would like them to. But then again, he sells a lot of shirts. And it's just the start of, there's this one show that he does here in Washington State, there's a UFO festival.
Mm.
And for some reason, for him selling T-shirts, he'll sell between $7,000 and $8,000 worth of T-shirts at this festival. And it's a week-long festival. So he's doing really good. He's making almost $1,000 a day selling shirts. And that's one of his biggest shows. But you're right. You have to. I think one of the reasons why people started seeing prints at comic book conventions is because they were light, they were easy to carry. If you're traveling, you can ship them ahead of time, and you don't need to have that many to make income off of. And it's all about time investment. To put a comic book together takes years.
Oh, yeah.
You know, a graphic novel, 3 or 4, years to put a graphic novel together. My movie review things, doing them, on average, I've been doing about one every 4 or 5 years. Well, 4 or 5 years, that adds up. I'm going to only be able to do about 2 more books, I think. I really want to do other type of book projects besides my movie reviews, so I'm thinking I'm going to have to drop it after a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the other thing too. It's just like, how are you in? Are you in it to make comics, or are you in it to make money? And what? At the end of the day, do you want to make the money? Trying to sell your comics, or do you just want to make things that people are gonna think or need, and tchotchkes and stuff like that? And I see a place for it. I actually like making T-shirts, and I love it even more when I see people wearing them and stuff. But it's at the end of the day, I'm not trying to make T-shirts for a living. I'm trying to make comics, and so I want to spend as much time as I can. Like you said, I have an idea for a graphic novel too, and is this. You don't want to get sidetracked just because the money is good, or there's a buzz for a specific kind of thing. I think not too long ago, people were looking into plush dolls and stuffed toys,
plushies,
yeah, and I mean that's kind of why I asked my questions about pins, because I definitely see them being popular, but for myself, it's cool. But I don't think I'd spend the money on a pin because I just already have so much stuff, But I'm almost 40, I'm kind of, cynical and jaded at this point. Like, I imagine if I was younger, I'd be like, oh, sweet, I got to collect them all, like you and your your cookie jars. But
we all go through a phase, dude.
Yeah. So I mean, there's definitely a demographic and all that.
Does an intervention, and she says, "Sweetheart, I'm tired of tripping over the cookie jars. No more cookie jars."
Yeah.
And what happens? She buys you a cookie jar because she's been infected.
Oh, just a sec. Before we close up, I just need an opinion. I'm planning to do a finished version of this as my next portfolio project. And yeah, as far beyond tweaking correcting the teacups and the furniture, it'll work fine just straight. But I was wondering if anybody had any thoughts of tweaks that could improve it, like, for example, a touch of perspective, changing the angle or something.
Well, you said portfolio piece?
Possibly, or a print.
So I mean, portfolio is, for me, when I think portfolio, it's like, who's the portfolio for? Like, are you going to go into commercial illustration with this? I mean, are you looking for children's books?
This looks like a children's book direction.
Yeah. So is that the direction you want to take? Like, who's the audience?
Right.
Oh, you don't know? I was hoping you had an answer.
Though it occurs to me that adding a children's book category to some of my pieces on the webpage might be a good idea.
So just assuming this was for a children's book, I'd say cleaning up the lines, because you have some
Oh,
you have some contrast issues and stuff.
cleaning up the lines goes without saying. It's a watercolor, but
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, are you redoing it, or are you going to continue working on this piece?
no, this is a watercolor I did for Mermaid. I'm talking about doing a line art version of it.
So
okay.
if you were to do a line art version of this, and if your audience is going to be children's magazines, the colors need to be brighter. Like you have to make the octopus a wonderful warm color, because the mermaid is this great blue, cool color, and the seaweed's a cool color. So I would make the octopus like an orange color.
Considering my other versions of the octopuses I'd done that month, I went with I switched to an orange once I got the hang of him. Just a second, case in point.
Yeah, see, even that looks too brown to me. You need to make it the color vibrant. And I think when you're doing it electronically, rather than as a watercolor, you'll be able to get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say also for like a magazine, or just even a general portfolio piece, like having something that stands out and pops.
Yeah.
Like Mark is trying to push you towards.
Yeah.
That definitely would make sense. But say this was part of a series, like say you are writing the children's book and you made this part of a an actual collection.
Right.
Your color choice might make more sense in the context of a group of other illustrations. Like maybe that's just the mood of that particular piece. Given the fact that I don't think you're doing that, I think that you're working on a single illustration that's meant to kind of pop out. Yeah, make sure it stands out, and like if you were to like lay all those pieces out next to each other, that would be the one your eye would go to just on color alone. So that would be a strong choice. And then the other things are like I mean, it kind of has a cartoonish feeling to it for more realism, in which case you want to look up your anatomy and kind of straighten out proportions a little bit. Or do you really want to push the cartoony feeling of it? And then I would also make sure that you focus on rendering the characters more than you render the environment and the background.
Yeah, as I said, a watercolor is serving as the basic composition.
Sure.
So,
well, gentlemen, it's been another hour of grand fun with both of you. I want to thank you both for joining me for yet another episode of Epic Sketch Time, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Cool.
All right, take care, guys.
Yep, see you all then.